Standing Finance Committee is resumed. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question, if I can find it, has to do with the technique. It's a technical question, but it's more about technical standards. The technique that is used, or the approach that is used in the patching of roads. Now, when the Honourable Member for St. James Central presented, one of the things that he raised was the issue of technical standards. And I dare say that one of the areas in which that will apply most is with respect to public works. My question is there a standard for the approach, the methodology that is used in patching roads? Is there a process that includes the use of equipment? And I'm hoping that in asking this question, I get back around to an answer on the availability of equipment that I asked on Friday. Because the question really is there enough equipment to be able to meet the technical standards for patching roads? Because what we've been seeing happening recently is that roads are patched. In some cases, they are, well, I suppose what I would only describe as beat in with the back of the shovel. This is what we've observed. I've observed going around the constituency and in other areas. It seems as if often there is not the equipment to be able to appropriately roll and make sure that it will not become disturbed. And then what happens is that there is some rainfall and whatever was done is undone. So the question really is, what are the standards? What is it that the ministry applies to say this is done according to whatever code or standard we apply, and does it involve the use of equipment, and is there enough equipment to make sure that when a road is patched that it is well done? That's the first question.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Tudor, to respond.
Yes, good afternoon. To answer your question, yes, there is a standard, but that standard is not often used. The standard, let me go back. There has been training in the past to those officers or those workers who have been assigned to patching trucks, patching crews, right? I did training with some of the officers a couple of years ago. Admittedly, that training needs to be reestablished because a lot of those people who would have been trained back then have since retired. But the idea is you come to the pothole, you square up the pothole, you square up the area, dig out the loose material, you apply what we call asphalt emulsion, and then we apply the hot mix asphalt to the area which has been excavated. And you tamp it using either a plate compactor or jumping jack. One of the issues that we have been having is the guys have not been using those plate compactors. Initially, they said the plate compactors were too heavy to lift on and off the trucks when you move from hole to hole. What we did was we installed what we call Tommy lifts on the trucks. Again, that was not done. So in the expediency of getting the work done, they would use what has been termed as throw and go. Stand on the back of the truck, throw off the stuff, and pack it with the back of the shovel, or if you're lucky, roll over it with one of the wheels of the trucks and move on. That is not the standard to be used, right? That is not the right practice to be used, correct. Now, we find that on rainy days like this, those holes which should have been patched, obviously the patch comes back up because the work was not properly done. On average, every year, we use about approximately 10,000 tons of hot mix asphalt to patch potholes alone. This is a cost of $5 million on average every year we spend on hot mix to patch potholes. So you see that invariably a lot of wastage comes about as a result of not being able to do the work as it should be done. What we will do, I will attempt again to train or retrain those individuals.
Is going to bring significant relief to the people in the Scotland district. I agree with you, there has to be sustainability. That was what it was initially based on. I'll ask the Deputy Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Tudor, to speak to the extent of the works in the Scotland district a bit more.
In terms of road repairs in the Scotland district, one must recognize that to repair a road, typical road in Scotland district, costs between 3 and 4 times the amount of money of repairing a road, say in St. Michael or St. George. The roads outside of the Scotland district cost 1/3 the amount of money that it costs to repair a road in the Scotland district, simply because one has to look at retaining structures, gabions, sheet pile walls, or what have you, in addition to doing what you call the mill and pave or reconstruction work. So it is very, very expensive to typically repair a road in the Scotland district. Having said that, as part of the Complant project, that has been divided into 3 sections. Roads which are to be simply mill and paved and improvement of the drainage structure. So we recognize that there's climate change, so we have a possible look at improving the size of the culverts and box drains that will be used to take into account the severity of the climate that we're getting within recent years. So there's the mill and pave program primarily. Then there's a road reconstruction program where the road has to be totally built over, so to speak. And then there's road reconstruction along with road and bridge construction. So there are basically 3 phases of the Scotland district improvement. But we must be cognizant, we must always be cognizant that there is mostly clays in those areas, and you have to treat clays differently than you treat the other ordinary soils you find in 6th, 7th of Barbados, right? So the works primarily have to, like I said, include gabion type structures, or if the Chinese are coming with more advanced technology than we currently are using, so be it. But gabions is what we've been using in the last, I don't know, 70 or 80 years. So that is what we've been going with primarily in the Scotland district area. But yes, to answer your question, we are cognizant of the fact that there's more to be done than just mill and pave operations, and that will not be so in the Scotland district. Wherever possible, we will do improvement as it relates to shoring up land slippage areas and things. We're also looking at repairing reinstalling new pipes, because again, in the Scotland district, a lot of failure occurs due to leakage. We don't know if the leakage takes place before the slippage or if the slippage causes leakage to take place. But to all intents and purposes, all the roads, there have been investigations done on the roads that are going to be fixed in the under the Complant program, and wherever necessary, those pipes will be changed out and new pipes installed. I think some effort has been made by the Water Authority to purchase the pipes necessary for this program. So that's it.
Thank you. Final question. I'm thinking it probably speaks to a collaborative effort between your ministry, Minister, and the Ministry of Energy. But one of the key questions has to do, in the context of the climate change discussion as well, has to do with the transition to electric vehicles and the efforts of the ministry to ensure that the public transport sector fully transitions. We made commitments to, by 2030, have at least 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the questions that the public is asking, not just in terms of their own personal use of vehicles or their own personal access to public transport, but also in terms of whether there are any opportunities for commerce and for business in the sector. One of the things people are concerned about is, what is this transition going to look like? How are we going to build out enough charging stations? Is there possibility for collaboration with the private sector to have these charging stations built out? But in particular, how is the public transport sector going to fully transition? And perhaps we could hear a bit about what are the plans in that sector.
Minister, again, as you said, you correctly said, this is the thrust of government in terms of being able to have more energy efficient vehicles. And so that process has already started, as you know, in terms of the electric buses. We've ordered actually about 10 more as well that should be coming in this financial year. And I know that in terms of even the training of the officers to be able to conduct the necessary repairs, that process is also ongoing. There are some concerns, obviously, in terms of our adequacy to be able to respond to the demands. But I'm going to ask Mr. Fabian Wharton from Transport Board CEO to perhaps just fill you in as to some of the discussions that have been being had with the Ministry of Energy recently in relation to the transition.
Right, good afternoon. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. My name is Fabian Wharton, Chief Executive Officer of Transport Board. As was correctly stated earlier, the transport sector is heading to using mostly electric vehicles in their fleet. We are looking for all new procurement for the Transport Board. Any additional buses will be in the form of electric vehicles, as was correctly stated before. And before I even go any further about the discussions as it relates to electric mobility and the use of renewable energy, I just want to give an indication to everyone as it relates to the cost associated with electric vehicles in the Transport Board, the benefits that we have seen, and how this has helped us with our expenditure and our bottom line. And I'll start by saying that of course, when you purchase new buses, you will immediately gain savings on your bus maintenance. And that is one of the key cost drivers of the Transport Board. And I'll give an example. At the end of March 2019, we had $15 million in bus maintenance. At the end of 2020, we were looking at $12 million. At the end of 2021, $6 million. So when you look at it, it's a downward trend as it relates to the bus purchase. So the government's investment, that capital investment into those new vehicles has really borne fruit first in the bus maintenance. But the question will be asked will be, okay, that is fine. We know if you buy a new bus, whether it's diesel or whether it's electric, you will get those savings on your maintenance. So what about then your fuel consumption costs? And that is one of the things that we have to critically look at. When we look at financial year 2020, we are talking about $8.2 million in diesel. When you combine financial year 2021, you are talking about just about $5.6 million when you combine the diesel fleet and the electric fleet to give you that what our total fuel cost would have been. And year to date, up to the end of February, we are talking about $4.9 million. So you can see the savings. And it must bear in mind that given that we were going through the pandemic and the protocols that were in place, the size of that fleet, that diesel fleet, was a bit larger than we had anticipated and budgeted for, because we were moving to reduce the size of that fleet so that we can gain those savings on diesel and therefore reduce our fuel bill. And that was principally because the diesel buses, the older diesel buses, have a larger capacity. And given that we were at 75% and at one point 60%, we needed to be able to move the traveling public within those restrictions, so we had to maintain those buses a bit longer. As it relates to the plans, we would have spoken extensively with the Ministry of Energy as it relates to using renewable energy, solar energy in particular, to charge buses. And as I was saying earlier, when we look at the 59 buses, we're going to be looking at around $2.7 million in electrical costs. So we need to move very quickly to see how we can get that off of our P&L. So we are in discussions. I'll start first with BNOCL as it relates to producing about 1 megawatts of photovoltaic and biodiesel blends. So we're now having that conversation. And so that is currently ongoing. We have already looked at the type of PV systems and the amount of energy that can be generated. We have also looked at the types of systems in terms of whether we use roof-mounted or even a ground mount. We have an expansive space at Mangrove where in discussions with also the Ministry of Energy, we are speaking now as it relates to a ground-mounted system there as well. And so in principle, what we have agreed to is to try to find a solution between these two entities, the ministry proper and BNOCL, to allow us to remove that $2.7 million from our P&L as it relates to electric charging, for bus charging. So those are the things that we are doing at the board right now as it relates to electric mobility and the use of renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Wharton. I suppose my only final comment would be to hear a bit more shortly into the future whether and to what extent there are opportunities for commerce, for small business, for people to, somewhere in this value chain, for Barbadians to participate in this e-mobility thrust of the government, because ultimately that's why we're here, to use this transition and transformation to provide opportunities. This green transition really, it only really gives us the transformational value if people are also able to earn and to participate in the industry. So I would look forward to hearing more on that in the future. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This question obviously goes straight to the estimates. Obviously, as a former minister who sat in that chair for quite a while, Minister, obviously I understand the details and the difficulties and the large nature of the ministry. But so as not to take too long in my preamble, I want to go straight to program 785, Assets Under Construction, Road Rehabilitation, CAF. Now, in the estimates, the previous year you budgeted $3 million, and in the current estimates you're budgeting $7 million. And why I ask that question is this, and I want to know if you think that $7 million will be enough. Bearing in mind that one of the first CAF programs is supposed to be, as I understand it, Highway 7. Highway 7 is absolutely critical at this time for two parts to your ministry. The first part to your ministry, of course, is fallen into significant disrepair, and Highway 7 is one of the most used highways in Barbados. And obviously, in my estimation, I don't know if a 5-6 kilometer road that $7 million would be enough to cover that. And then the second part of the question is significant tourism investments are going on that coast. We have Margaritaville is about to start very shortly, which is the one next to Kentucky. We have then after that, we anticipate that the new Hyatt will be going up very, very shortly, and there's a whole host of hotel and tourism developments which will need water and will need a significant large number and change in the volumes that can be delivered through the piping that is in that existing road. So the piping of that road needs to be improved, and that is one of the reasons that we had developed a new Highway 7 infrastructure. And I am surprised that I only see $7 million budgeted when I would anticipate that to be able to get Highway 7 done will be significantly more than that. And I would ask, the question obviously then is, when will Highway 7 start, and whether this $7 million will be enough to get you done, to get you sorted for Highway 7?
Thank you, Minister. I think having been the minister previously, I think you already know the answer to the question. But that notwithstanding, I believe that about 25 million had been requested initially to be able to do the extent of the works under the CAF program. As I would have indicated earlier, with the number of the roads that colleagues had mentioned, we were talking about 1 million in some cases or more. Some is less, but in a lot of cases, the roads where the greatest complaints are coming, obviously, is 1 million and more in terms of the financing. So the simple answer is we ask for one set of money because we know that that is what is projected in order to do the volume of work that needs to be done. However, we have been allocated the 7 in order to be able to carry out the works that have been prioritized in this financial year. I think, as you would well know, once these works are properly executed, the option is there for us to be able to go back for a supplementary. But I think across government, and in particular with these projects, the key here is that we have to execute the monies that we have been given. And so that 7 million is really scratching the surface, but there's obviously lots more that will have to be budgeted. I think that the other issue is one of capacity. There's no point, we know what we have to do, but there's no point trying to put in the estimates that we have to put in 25 million, when in truth and in fact we may not have the capacity to do the volume of the work all one time. So I think from a budgeting standpoint, that is why the 7 million is reflected in these estimates at this point in time. But I'll ask the PS as well to just elaborate further specifically on your questions to Highway 7.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and also thank you, Senior Minister Duguid, for your question. The direct answer is $7 million cannot fix Highway 7, because the estimate for Highway 7 from Thornbury Hill to Rendezvous, and this is only the phase 2, is 23.8 million. However, does not mean that we cannot start. And I should probably back up a bit. We were successful in getting the swap loan from CAF, and must use this opportunity to thank, as she then was, Minister Cattle and the staff in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, especially the PIU, for assisting us in that in getting that loan. That's over a period of 3 years, and I think it's $50 million US for road repairs. But as you know, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, it's about capacity. We have 2 road builders in Barbados. We also have 6 IDB global roads, which I thought you were going to ask us about, but we have 9 IDB global roads to do within the next year to the next 15 months. And we also have the Scotland District program. So when we sit down and we decide on the CAF schedule, then this will determine if we will start Highway 1, that stretch from Rendezvous to the Independence Arch to coincide, which would be good timing if we can do it to coincide with the work that the MPC is about to do, and also with any work that is required on the Force Main. So that Utilities Committee that you previously chaired will be very busy in determining what aspects of the work we can undertake. But the 7 million for CAF, that is certainly not intended to last us for the entire financial year. I hope I've answered the questions related to Highway 7, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, PS, for that answer. I won't get into the issues of putting small amounts in estimates. I will leave that for another time. The second question has to do with the pedestrianization of Broad Street. We did a lot of work on the pedestrianization of Broad Street, and we seem not to be able to get that through as yet. Do you have a timeline and a framework, or is that now still on the front burner, or has that moved to the back burner, the pedestrianization of Broad Street?
Yeah, Minister, we would have touched on this on Friday, but I'll just ask CTO perhaps to just, refresh in terms of perhaps what you may have missed. CTO?
Thank you. Generally, yes. it's difficult for us to say if it's on the front or back burner, but it's on a burner. Let's put it that way. Pedestrianization for Bridgetown was really centered around doing Broad Street next. You will remember that Swan Street is already pedestrianized, and actually that brought a lot of life and vitality back to Swan Street in that area. So we expect that doing something like that for Broad Street would also bring life and vitality back to that street. But because Broad Street is the main flow through Bridgetown in the opposite direction to Wharf Road, for instance, if we do decide to go ahead with pedestrianization of Broad Street, we have to still consider how will people move around, and not necessarily just on foot as well. Should you bring in shuttles, that would be part, say, of a park and ride system. There are other things that will go along with that. What would you do with the roads that will be adjoining Broad Street? So there's still those finer details to decide and determine how we will move forward, but it's definitely very much still on the burner, still definitely on the stove, and it's really just a matter for where we will place it in the order of priority of all the other things that we're going to be doing. And of course, we still have to have discussion with both the business sector and the people there's still people that live in Bridgetown, and that would affect them as well. So all of that will be part of the process.
Thank you, CTO. My third and final question, and forgive me if I go completely constituency now. The people of Garden Gap and both Garden Gap 1 and 2 have suffered tremendously. First, from when the South Coast Sewage Project was done many years ago, and secondly now as a major thoroughfare to be able to connect Highway 7 to Golf Club Road. They have significant numbers of cars and PSVs and so on that zoom through there. And they would have sent forward a petition to me, and I've forwarded it to PS as well as to you, Minister. And I'm asking that the ministry look at it as a matter of urgency before somebody is injured in that area of Garden Gap 1 and 2. I know that all throughout Barbados people are asking for road humps, and I know that we have to sometimes look for other traffic calming measures, that is clear. But we're asking certainly for some urgency on it because it is becoming a significant problem for the people of Garden Gap 1 and 2.
Thank you, Minister. I'm actually surprised that you didn't get it done when you were Minister. But I assure you that we have...
need to look back and ask the CTO why.
So I'm actually going to ask CTO to perhaps respond to you so that the residents can be assured as to where it is in terms of the priorities.
I will start by saying that Minister Duguid was somewhat like you, Deputy Prime Minister, in that he recognized that when he came to the ministry, he would just not be looking out for just his constituency, he was looking out for Barbados. So thank you. But we have actually looked at Garden Gap 1 and 2. We have identified the locations where the humps will go, but we're thinking that that's not going to be enough because Garden Gap 1 and 2, they're also close to its Navy Gardens and the Blue Waters areas, and we're therefore looking to broaden our scope a little bit and do an area-wide program. So they will be coming, but we don't want to just put them, because literally sometimes when you have those connecting roads and you put humps in one road, the people just go over to the next road and cause you problems over there. So definitely in this one, we want to do an area-wide consideration of that area so that we will not make it worse for anybody if we put humps in one road and not the others, okay? It's coming. Be patient.
Thank you very much, CTO, because in the same way the residents are going to hold me to that, I'm going to hold you to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, just let me ask honorable members there are quite a number of persons who wish to make a contribution or ask questions, and I'm asking honorable members to be as precise as possible, get straight to your questions as much as you possibly can, and bearing in mind we also have a time frame within which to conclude this head. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Sir, I haven't had the opportunity already, sir. I will do my second question after the others have waited on theirs, just in case. I will give way, sir.
You are giving way your...
I'll give way to anybody who's not intervening yet, although they came in after I put up my card.
Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to all. Following on from my friend and colleague from St. George North, I want to start by thanking the ministry for the work done in the City of Bridgetown, particularly in the area of drainage. You would recognize that over the last few days we had some lovely weather, depending on the angle you look at it from. We had a lot of rain, and we were able to see and reap the results of the work put in by the Drainage Division. So I want to start by thanking the ministry for that work, and obviously the MPs that went before me in Dame Billy Miller and Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostick. Now, to get down to the point, I want to basically ask, in relation to the estimates, similar to the colleague that went before me, if there is money within the vote of the estimates as I scour it, in terms of work, or money or funding for emergency works. And the example I have in mind is the Kensington Road, which we have issues of the grills, as experienced by other colleagues here. We have issues of drainage, as explained by colleagues here, and we have the issue of the road actually collapsing. Now, do we have money for that road, or do we have money in the vote for in the event that we have roads that are prone to collapsing or on the verge of collapsing?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I suspect your question is grounded not just in me as the minister, but also based on a visit that we paid to the mosque a couple of months ago, and some concerns that were raised in relation to Kensington New Road. I did not know then I would be the Minister of Public Works, and so perhaps it is timely that I have this opportunity to be able to oversee the works that will have to be done in that particular area. I don't think as a rule there are emergency monies, but I do feel that depending on what transpires, obviously funds are allocated to be able to accommodate. But I'm going to ask CTO to just speak to the issues in relation to the Kensington area specifically, and in terms of the plans for that specific location in the coming months.
Okay, I'm going to throw that question to the expert, which will be Charles Yearwood.
Good afternoon. The issue at Kensington Road had to do with the capacity of the drain and that feeds the drains, rather, that feed the Princess Alice Pump House at the junction with Brankers on Fontibel. The work undertaken by, not Drainage Division, he mentioned earlier, but with the ministry to carry out both the works at Murphy Pastor and then from Murphy Pastor, this is from St. Mary's School to Fontibel, was to do a number of things. One, to reduce the floodplain within Murphy Pastor, to have a greater flood storage. And once that happened, then the waters on Kensington New Road and other small drains that run into that same drain out by Brankers can go off faster. The concerns based on the complaints from the persons at Kensington New Road is that there's oftentimes, it's very flat, and there's small, what I call duck ponding in low rainfall events. That has to do a lot with the land use practices. Most of the persons there, though there's a sewer system, still drain the water, the sewage, the water from their kitchen and bathroom into the public drain. Come to greases, and then you have algae and green waters, a lot of phosphates, soaps, and the like. There's a need to, so in terms of the condition of the water, or the quality of water, we need to have the persons draining the grease trap and draining it into the sewer system. There's some areas where there's a need for maintenance, and again, because of the regular practice of draining the waters into the drain, then we cannot stop to do that remedial work in the drain inverts. There's a need also to upgrade the grills on, or the manholes on Fontibel to allow for regular maintenance. The sort of practice of persons driving and dropping garbage outside their cars, they get into the drains, they get into cow mouths, and it cannot be cleaned. So the problem is not so much one of flooding now, but I can give you assurance that the works done on the Murphy Pasture project will have enough flood storage capacity to allow that water from the Fontibel Road, particularly in the northern side, to drain into that one. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I, like my colleague from St. James Central, have a fear that we engaging in these self-pleasuring exercises. I want to get down to brass tacks. And my question really, I've heard this morning about the need to, and we will have to look at, I want a commitment from the ministry that we're going to fix the grills. We can do it in this financial year because we have X amount of money, or we have to defer it, but at least we have a concrete answer and we understand where it is we are going. So if we can get some clarity on that, I would be the most happiest honourable member.
Honourable member, if only it was always that straightforward, then I would have had answers to my questions on the floor of Parliament over 10 years ago, and every year thereafter. The truth of the matter is, I think you've heard the officers. We do prioritize within the ministry given the resources. I am intimately aware of the issue that you are raising in relation to the residents in Kensington Road. They had went so far in our discussions, and I mentioned it to the PS just now, as to indicate the impact on their businesses in the surrounding community, and that even from their position as at a level of investment, they were willing to invest more once the surrounding community was improved. And I think that is something to be borne in mind in terms of prioritizing as well. But as you heard the technical officers speak to, there are other issues that obviously impact on our ability to do the road. And I think we can't just commit and say we will do the grills or we can just do the road. I think it is clear that there has to be a comprehensive approach taken to that particular project. Obviously the work at Murphy Pasture is the start. And I do recall the significant investment that was made in relation to Murphy Pasture. I don't think the Deputy CTO actually spoke to it, but there was a significant investment made there to be able to alleviate the flooding issues. And so the city has been neglected over the years. There's no question about that. But I think what you can say to your constituents certainly is that the work has started. And while it may seem that you're not able to give a definitive timeline, I will give you the assurance that we will make this a priority and at least engage with you and the residents to be able to lay out a roadmap as to how we're going to address the concerns of the city residents.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And for the House benefit and those listening on the outside, they can say that the ministry is well aware of the issues. The community there, particularly the Muslim community, they put their hand up in the air and confess, yes, we are putting our kitchen waste into the sewage. We are prepared to address that by investing in singular, individual, and communal grease traps. And they have indicated their willingness to invest more in the area once they get the partnership from the ministry in relation to things like, again, the road is collapsing, again, things like the drainage. And again, we thank the drainage for their effort in cleaning, but I may not be an expert. I'm not an engineer for sure, but I know about gravity, and I know that there is an incline going upward towards the Advocate end of the road. And if you clean and you wash, I know that gravity will bring it right back down, because water takes the path of least resistance. And they would like that it be cleaned out, that it be shoveled out. And those are the sort of things that I believe that we should be able to say with some definition that we are able to do within a particular time frame, because that is what we are here to do. In closing, though, for me, I will want to ask the question to the ministry from a policy perspective. If there is a policy, and if not, can there be a policy for some public-private NGO partnership, third sector partnership in relation to roads? I give the example of Man's Gap. I give the example of Church Gap. These are gaps that they have told me have been undone for the last 41 years in one case and longer in another. And I've reached out to some companies who say, you know what, we are willing to partner with government, or we are willing to do it once we get the permission from the ministry. So my question is, in other places, can this be done? Is this a policy and a desire of the ministry to work with agencies, organizations, philanthropic groups that may be willing to assist? Because all the time we hear about the lack of resources, and if we can get these sort of partnerships going, is this something that the ministry is definitely amenable to? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I appreciate the thrust to have the private sector involved, particularly sometimes it feels as though government doesn't move fast enough. I've actually been noticing a number of even residents getting together where they feel as though roads were not done either properly, or that they felt that they needed to take things into their own hands. But I do feel that while there may be some challenges on the parts of the ministry to be able to respond at times, whether financial or otherwise, I think there are still some liability issues that have to be addressed, and that perhaps is why you don't see the ministry coming forward often to enter into those types of partnerships. I think anything that is done in terms of a partnership will obviously have to not only go to finance, but it will also have to address the legal implications of so doing. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's anything that we can't consider, but it obviously has to meet these specific standards that are met by Ministry of Public Works at this point in time. So again, if there are persons or companies that you believe are interested in entering into those partnerships, feel free to share that with the ministry so that that can be considered and a position taken in relation to the extent of the works. But it is, as I said, it's not something that we discourage, but equally, if we are to encourage it, it has to meet certain requirements before it can be agreed upon.
I would like to close by thanking the ministry, like I started in the beginning, but I believe that government is here to facilitate and regulate. We started with the technical officers saying that there are particular standards that they don't even follow themselves. So I'm not saying that that should be allowed to carry, but I believe that that should really mean that we should be willing to work with companies that are willing, and the government facilitate and the government regulate. But it's really on that note, I would like to thank the ministry, and let's move on to the next person. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It is for you, Honourable Member, to bring that information to the table. So that's why I'm saying that there is a willingness, but it has to meet certain criteria. So if you have those persons who can assist, please make the recommendations to the ministry so that we don't speak general. I think what we have to get to is very specific in terms of who wants to help, how they will help, and let us, I agree with you, we have to set the parameters as government. We can no longer say we can't do it because of X or Y, because we have had our own shortcomings as government and respective ministries as well. But at the same time, the persons who are interested need to put up their hand, and they need to say that they're interested. So I would suggest that you urgently submit that information to the ministry.
Honourable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister and team, I will get straight to the questions. And I have 3 of them. I will ask them all in one shot, and your team can respond so we don't have to come back. I want to first look at the registration process for new vehicles. I have been speaking to a dealership recently, and I understand that it takes at least a week now to have a new vehicle registered. And I just would like to know from your team what are the steps that are taking place in that process, and also what are the plans to improve that timeline, because I believe that that does have an impact on the ease of doing business and other aspects of our daily operations as citizens and as a country. Secondly, I saw in the estimates under Program 510 and Subprogram 0495 that we have quite a bit going on relative to tenantry roads. And I wanted to find out if maybe your technical team can give us a listing of those planned roads for this fiscal. Thirdly, I wanted to find out about the issue of traffic congestion. One of my parliamentary colleagues would have mentioned the fact that because of traffic congestion, I think they alluded to it, because of traffic congestion on main roads, we have a knock-on issue of traffic diversion, where they go through then residential areas, and that's where we get into the discussion of the traffic calming measures, etc. But I wanted to find out, I know that it was mentioned in the context of Bridgetown relative to traffic mitigation studies or traffic studies, etc., and I want to know if there's a broad-based plan to have traffic management studies done generally, and if so, if there are to address such issues in the country. I speak in particular about the stretch coming from Warrens through to Huddersfield Turning, and Mr. Chairman, if you've ever been, I would say, trapped on that road in the evening, it is a painful experience. There's no road that you can divert off when you get on that highway, and you can be on that road for sometimes upwards to an hour. And I'm oftentimes sitting in traffic, and I'm sure many of our citizens are, and wondering if there's anything that can be done to alleviate this traffic situation that we have in Barbados. So just wanted to find out, the third question is if there are any general broad-based traffic management plans and solutions contemplated by the ministry. Those are the three questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Minister. To deal with the first question, I know that was raised on Friday. I'll just ask the PS just to repeat for the benefit of yourself and others as it relates to the registration of new vehicles.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Good afternoon, Honourable Member. The registration of vehicles in Barbados is really a function of the Barbados Revenue Authority. However, the licensing authority does play a role in that the weight certificate is prepared and produced by the Barbados Licensing Authority, and if it's a case where there's a need for an examination certificate, that is done by the Barbados Licensing Authority. What I can say though is that sometime this week, depending on the schedule of the acting Prime Minister, we will be meeting with the Revenue Commissioner. As former minister, had already met with her on a couple occasions in November and early December. We put a number of policies in place, which BRA is now about to roll out, which I'm told will significantly enhance the system of registration of vehicles in terms of the speed. Also, what we have done from the ministry's end, there's a piece of legislation, which a draft at this stage, which just came back from the Chief Parliamentary Council, which will allow agencies other than the licensing authority. Right now, it's only the licensing authority. Will allow agencies other than the licensing authority to weigh vehicles, examine vehicles. So we think that this will also speed up the process, because instead of waiting in the long line at the licensing authority, owners of vehicles will now have the opportunity to go to other places of business, and they have already been identified. It's just a matter of the chief licensing officer having it so done that it is clearly stated in the law. But we would have met with the Automobile Dealers Association. They are very happy with the proposed move, and I will reach out on a limb to say that by the 2nd of May, we should have that legislation proclaimed, and the Barbadian vehicle owner will have a lot more options as it relates to weighing and the examination. Also, by that time, we would have met with the Barbados Revenue Authority, and we would put the necessary measures in place on Easy Pay to facilitate online payments, and by extension, the registration process should go a lot easier. And that's quickly, because I know the chairman said we are stretched for time. As we roll out the electronic vehicle registration, there is a proposal that all new cars coming into Barbados will be tagged. So that will also assist. But importantly, we will also be tagging all vehicles on island. So that information will go into the new vehicle registration system, and the registration of vehicles should be a lot easier than it is now. So God willing, I expect that by this time next year, while there may be a similar question, it certainly will not relate to the length of, it certainly should not relate to the length of time it takes. Thank you.
And Minister, in relation to your question relating to the tenantry roads, I'm not sure if you were trying to be specific in relation to your own constituency. I doubt that you expect us to call out every single tenantry road to be done under this program.
I actually, Minister, was trying, Deputy PM, trying not to be specific to my constituency. But
Everyone else is.
Well, there you go. Well, there you go. By all means. St. Michael North.
Mr. Tudor, if you can just respond specifically to St. Michael North.
St. Michael North, well, let me put it this way. Under the 10th road program, there are 5 roads based on the funds that has been allocated for the coming financial year. We've identified 5 roads to be done under this program. We have 2 in St. George, 2 in St. John, and 1 in St. Michael. Can't tell you 1 in St. Michael, but we have, that's the distribution of the roads that we plan to do under the 10th road program.
Can I put in a plug for that St. Michael one to be St. Michael North? Thanks. Just asking.
Of course you can.
Port Springs Eternal.
Relates to the traffic congestion in the Warrens area. We did touch on that earlier. I think the ministry is well aware of the concerns there and are going to make best efforts to try to resolve some of the areas, the issues at that junction.
Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am likely to be placing more emphasis on the representative of being the representative of the Tenantry Road man. So I'm a bit sad to hear that you only have 1 Tenantry Road in line. Sir, but I represent people with legs that don't have shoes. I represent people with shoes and don't have legs. When it comes to tenantry roads, it means that those persons are at a great disadvantage. I am surprised to hear everybody talk about rocking pigeons and tires and vehicles not being able to pass through here and there. I believe I belong to a grassroots party, but people going off track. There are lots of unpaved roads in St. Michael's. My major focus today is on the lands once owned by the Lasses family in the Bell. And since the Lasses family left those areas, it looks the same way as when those families were here in the 17th century. They're the most rundown districts in the community. Some people don't have water. Some people don't have, in fact, they run their own electricity lines underground, and therefore the government cannot move as expeditiously as they normally would. But this is a local matter. I'm not going to talk about what's going to be happening down Broad Street. My people can't talk about any partnership. The only partnership they have with this government is the vote that they have given. They don't have any material or monetary wealth. They're really dependent on the state. And I want the bureaucrats, and I also want the politicians to be extremely clear on that. I went to these people and they sent me to Parliament 5 times. I am still pressing on this same issue that I was pressing on the first time I came here. So I would love to see the concept of territory lands that I'm talking about in the Bell. I'm not talking about the road itself. But I'm talking about the challenges that people face. People face health challenges only because they don't have proper roads. If you want me to expand on that, I can. People face challenges when there's climate change. Because when the water floods out the entire area, people can't get to work. You can't walk through the area because of the pools of water settled in different places. A small gesture has been made on the eve of the last election. But I want to know, and I'm hearing that you can't give time limits or anything like that. You don't understand a priority. We come to convert a backward plantation economy into a modern economy as a government. When am I going to see the work in the Bell? Odessa McLean, you know, you did some work in Odessa McLean, but the area that is unpaved and is central to my concern is the train line area. Look, we give people Barbara Green or asphalt to run a train line project, you know, to ride racer bicycles, and most of the people that ride in pan, they look like me. This is serious. And I would not like to know coming back here again and asking for this. When can I expect? I don't want to give me a date. I don't want to give me the hour. But give me something called reason, apply reason, and give me a sensible answer. I don't want nobody filibustering and dog dancing with these things. Tell me, I hope that by June or I hope that by so-so, I'll be able to see some work being done for these people. When can I... Give me some form of satisfaction about when we can get back to that.
Honourable Member, you always speak with such passion on behalf of the constituents of St. Michael East, and I think we all hear you very clearly in terms of how long that this matter has been outstanding. But I'm mindful as well that it is not as straightforward a matter as perhaps might at first appear. It's not just a simple case of roads. We're talking about persons who have settled in an area, you know, obviously through no fault of their own, because I always maintain that if we don't build out housing for people, they will find a way to find accommodation for themselves. But it is a matter that the government has placed as a priority. I know that I can ask the Barbados Water Authority to speak more deeply to the issue of the sewering in that particular area, because that is really where the first priority has to be in terms of the homes and the households that are in that area. I know that is a long-standing issue as well that you have raised, but the two are very deeply interconnected as well. And I'll just ask Mr. Halliday to speak to the progress that has been made, because we've made the priority that particular area in the Bell. And in terms of it going before the board, I know that it has recently gone before the board, and I believe the designs and stuff are in the process of being done. So I can assure you that the priority is in fact being given, even if you don't see reflected in these estimates right away intentions to actually do the road. But I can still safely say it is part of the overall process of the transformation of the Bell area. Mr. Halliday?
Good afternoon once again. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. What the Barbados Water has been doing is really a part of an entire infrastructural program designed for the areas that have been, such as yours, Minister, and there are a number of areas that we've looked at acutely. And certainly, while it seems as though on the eve of elections, a gesture, and I'm trying to not misquote you, was made, or seem to have been made, it really accumulated of months, if not years, of work towards that particular juncture. I would ask actually Dr. John Mwanza, who was intimately involved in some of the presentations for changes to the Act and who would have addressed in most part, along with other stakeholder ministries, what the changes to the water zoning, I'll ask him to speak to it, so that he can actually speak to the differences or changes that are eminently before us, and why is it we are at the particular stage that we are at. Thank you. Dr. Mansa?
Thank you. Good afternoon. This again goes back to the issue of when you go into an area like the Bell Tenantry, what is it that you're looking to do? Over the years, we have talked about swearing the bell. But in the context of the kind of development that has taken place, where you have residents who have settled there, who do not have public water supply, and do not have a proper road network. To provide a solution, you have to look to provide a complete solution. And so in looking at what needs to be done in the bell, we recognized, one, as Mr. Prescott indicated, we have to upgrade the roads. And in upgrading the roads, we have to ensure that the utilities that the residents have buried underground do not get in the way, and the workers don't get electrocuted. We have to put in a water supply infrastructure, and we have to put in the road network, the sewer network. And so we then devised a phased program for installing those solutions. And what we have asked the professionals that we are contracting to do the design for is to do the designs for us in that phased manner, with the installation of water and sewerage being the first phase. We just contracted somebody to do a drone survey so that we could see the layout of the existing lands and how a proper road network could be instituted. So they'll provide us with an outline of the road network so that when we install the sewers and we install the pipe network, we'll be installing them in a position where when we come to do the roads, those issues will not get in the way. The board only last week approved for us to sit down and negotiate the final details of the contract with the designers. So by the end of March, those designers should be in the field collecting the necessary data and starting to do the designs. They have indicated that it may take 6 to 9 months to do the designs, and thereafter will then tender for the construction of the water and sewerage network, and also start to plan how we will phase in the upgrading of the road network. Because right now, some of the roads are so small such that the ambulances of the fire service would have great difficulty going in there. We will also have to look at how we address the electricity supply so that it's no longer an ad hoc situation, but it is a designed implementation to ensure the safety of the people that will be living in those residences. So we are moving forward, and the design is going to be looking at the Bell Tenantry, the Bellevue Gap, as well as Bailey Alley in St. George.
Honourable Member.
Yeah. This would really turn into a conversation, and I am not, to be courteous, even to remain cordial, I am not going to continue with this because there are questions to be answered, and I've made many trips there with different teams, private and government, over the years, and I really don't know if I'll be able to keep quiet and endure silence and pain for the next year or so if I don't see any activity occurring there. So I just want to put that warning on the table. Sir, Mr. Chair, I also am concerned about what I consider to be poor signage all across Barbados. Sometimes you see signs, road signs, and you can't even make out what is on the road signs. Sometimes the signs are extremely small, like they don't have any fixed size for the signs as well. I also am very concerned about clearly identifying different locations. If somebody goes into Wildy or if somebody goes into the Ivy, can't we have some signs? I'm not looking at any models in North America, although they're very relevant here. We need signs. We're going to too many districts, and you're going to be asking questions in the small 166 country. So we need proper signs across especially in St. Michael's and areas of the country as well. So the other thing is that I'm a little concerned about is that I always say to the House, becoming a republic has to mean something. I want to know who is the persons who select the names for these different streets. I'm not, and I know this is not my friend from St. George. I went to an area and see a sign marked James Drax Road in St. George. That is insanity of the highest order for anybody in 2022 to name any street in Barbados after that family and that individual, a man who helped write the slave codes in Barbados, a man who designed the model for slavery in Barbados and export the model to North America and other places. Nobody should be allowed to put up a sign like that as long as it's a road being used by the general public. And I'm only citing that as one example. We have to address a lot of these things if we are going to know who we are and change the mindset. And this has to be related to what is happening at the Ministry of Transport and Works as well. So I'm asking, is there a special committee or anybody just gets up and say, this is the name of the road for this specific area? That can't be reason. That can't be working within the interests of a country that is talking about Republican status. So I just want to know who is the individuals responsible for that work. And then the last question would be, I would like to see a clear demarcation of the Zone A area, because I only know it by officers pointing out the area to me. I would like to see at least a map with some red line saying this is the specific area, so that the people who were in the Zone 1 area, that is now out of the area, which is now going into Zone B, they will know what liberties they now have, right, and legitimate opportunities they now have living outside of the now Zone A area. And I need to know where the Zone A areas are. So just the radius is much smaller now than before, right? And I just want to know, and I would like to have the access to some map that says this is what it is. If there are any other prerequisites, because sometimes this thing seems to be part of an exercise, a culture of dragging of the feet. If there are any other prerequisites that are needed, and we have to come to the House of Assembly to make sure these things become a reality, I would like to know how long would it take for us as well to see those things come here, to put things in law, or to give some idea to the members of Parliament exactly what is happening there in the Zone 1 pocket. And we can always talk about whether people be able to put in toilet facilities and install water and poles and electricity and all that. So I hope that you can pull two questions from out of what you just said.
Thank you, Honourable Member. To deal with the latter question that you've raised in relation to the Zone 1. Obviously, that we touched on that earlier in relation to the water protection regulations. And I would have indicated, and you should also be aware, that appears on the Parliament's website in terms of what is being proposed. In terms of why we haven't done it yet is really because it was there. They were there since the last session on the previous minister. We obviously are in the middle of estimates, and I believe as soon as estimates are over and we have everything in place to be able to roll out the regulations, that we will be able to deal with it perhaps within the next few weeks. So I can give you the assurance that that work is already in motion, and the intention is certainly to regularize for a number of households what has certainly been a burden to them for several years. So simply put, light is at the end of the tunnel. As it relates to that, just more details, I will just ask Dr. Mwanza to just speak to the issue of the zoning, just so that to address the specific concerns that you've raised as well. Dr. Mwanza?
Yes, we've actually been looking at how we could address that in terms of access to information. We have subdivided the public education program to a point where we will do a combination of presenting the information on the zone boundaries in the media, but in addition, we will also have sector-specific meetings where we'll be able to share that information. For example, for the Bell area, we'll be able to go in the Bell area and sit down and point out where the new boundaries are, as well as what applies now that these changes have been made, what is the new requirements. So that is part of what is going to be done. And the maps will be available on our website for people to have a look at it. And those who want to request more specific details, there will be a provision for them to apply to the Water Authority, for them to do the review, more detailed review for them, and provide them with a certificate that explains where they are and what they can do in those areas at a fee.
Dr. Mwanza, and if we can come to the other question in terms of who selects the names for the roads, CTO?
Thank you. Typically, no, the ministry does not decide on the names of roads. Usually the residents that live there will suggest names. What we do is we review names, because obviously we wouldn't want them to have a name that might be offensive to someone or anyone else. So where there is a residents community or association, they would usually put forward the names, and then we spot check with some of the residents just to make sure that they're okay with the names. And once they are, then we go ahead and make the signs up and we erect them. Also, when there are larger developments, the developers themselves, before even the lots have been sold, before the town planning application has been approved, they would have names on the roads, and therefore they become the acceptable names. But we do, in the ministry, as I said, do a little check to make sure that the names might not be some that might be offensive, because we do have, now back in the ministry, we have a research officer, and we have other officers that are familiar with different road names. And we're also trying to, in some respects, Barbados has some road names that appear in more than one parish, which can become quite confusing. So we're also trying, yes, so we're also trying to limit that and also be sure about the spelling, that sort of thing. That's how we get involved. But largely, the ministry's officers do not select road names.
Thank you.
I just want to say thanks, but to all the officers for their response. Although I would like to say that sometimes I need a little more clarity, especially when it comes to saying that they don't get involved. I am not concerned if they get involved. I'm concerned with if they have the authority to get involved. all right? And I'm saying that if they don't have the authority to get involved, then they need to have it, because nobody should be putting names of streets across this country that the people of Barbados find offensive to them. And then, sir, just give me a little second here. The name James Drax is like poison at present in England. I am involved in all kinds of discussions over the Drax plantation in England at present. And it's unfortunate that the Barbadian people are not responding in the same way that the people are, that the people that are in England is responding. And that's the reason why you say that.
Thank you. Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you.
And before you begin, Honourable Member, we have a very, very and extremely tight schedule, and we may be only able to get to one other person. So those persons who might have had an opportunity before, we will ask you that you may probably have to forego, because I would want to give the Honourable Member based on my record, who has not been able to speak as yet, the opportunity to do so. Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, let me thank the team representing the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. I had a very enjoyable 17 months working with them. They were very competent, and I would in particular like to recognize and single out the Permanent Secretary for Mr. Mark Cummins, who would have been my principal advisor and one who would have guided me during my first term as a minister. I know we're pressed for time, but Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the Barbados Water Authority how much money will be invested in heavy-duty equipment in this financial year to execute the trenching and other works in this financial year as part of the Barbados Water Authority's Capital Works Program? That's my first question, sir.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask General Manager, Mr. Halliday, to respond to you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you to our former minister as well. I think it's a very good question, and I appreciate that you've asked it. In the last several months, we have looked at all of the investments that we needed to meet. On the equipment side, in totality, the board would have committed to at least 27 million over the next several years in equipment purchases and replacement. Previously we have gone the route of lease, and we have now opted to do hire purchase arrangements, and several of those replacement equipment are now coming in. And just to be clear, that is a lot of specialized equipment, heavy duty, yes. It also redounds to equipment that we're purchasing from for the wastewater division, which is several jetta trucks, and we're still pursuing a camera truck as well. The equipment that we're getting is really not just only to replace, but also to augment where we have had a deficit in equipment that would allow us to take our crews back up to the normal or regular numbers, and that in turn would allow us to be able to be a lot more responsive to some of the challenges that we've had of recent. Thank you, Minister.
My next question would be in respect of works to be executed in the north of Barbados. Perhaps I'm asking this for the chairman of the committees. But what plans are in place, and can you tell Barbadians what plans you have in place to address this situation in respect of the replacement of water mains in the north of Barbados? I know that you completed the other projects, for example, the vineyard augmentation projects, but perhaps if you can give us an idea of how much money you intend to spend this year, and also give the country perhaps a feel for the costing of a mains replacement program for Barbados, and how you perhaps believe that replacement water mains replacement program should be executed.
Mr. Halliday, I think you can elaborate on this.
Thanks for your question again, Minister. If I may be allowed some liberty, I think I need to give a broader context to your question. The Barbados Water Authority is currently committed to almost $500 million in projects. And of course, we cannot fund that immediately, and therefore we have to attack it in bite sizes. And therefore, what we're doing in the north as part of an overall strategic mains replacement program is but part and parcel of a longer term program. For the next 3 years, really, if we are to get to the point where we want to be, we need to spend at least 120 million on the mains replacement if we are to satisfy the needs and to deal with the aging infrastructure that we have. For the moment, we've split that into 3, and really, ideally so, if we can secure the funding, we need to tackle it at least, we need to do at least 40 million in replacement in the next several years, at least each year. For the north, specifically, the funding cost for replacement of mains in the north was about $44 million. And while we've started that in parts where we're looking at, for instance, Lambert to Boscobel and 3 other main areas, I think it's very important for everyone to understand that we have to take it in bits at a time. I will ask Charles to speak to the general thrust of not Charles Leslie, our Director of Engineering, to speak to the general thrust of our program in the north, which is really significant and varied. But I think there needs to be an appreciation that when we're dealing with mains program, and the reason why this has become such an issue is that just a few years ago, 2 short years ago, we were dealing with an average of 800 service bursts a month. We're now up to 1,600 at peak. We were dealing with an average of 80 burst mains a month. We are now up to about 120. And therefore, the program becomes extremely critical. And what we're trying to do, past what we have done in the east, which was a $70 million price tag, what we now need to do in the north would even exceed that. But it has been long in coming. We've been preparing ourselves for it. And Charles Leslie will speak to the specifics. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just to add to what Mr. Halliday was saying, in the north of the island, we're attacking the problem there in phases. As I indicated on Friday, we're looking at augmentation, we're looking at mains replacement, and we're also looking at rehabilitation of a lot of the infrastructure there in terms of like the reservoirs and pumping stations in that area. In terms of the mains themselves, as Mr. Halliday was saying, we had identified a package of approximately 40 kilometers of main, and a kilometer of main takes us approximately $1 million to be replaced. The smaller mains are slightly less than $1 million, but the larger mains will be over. So on average, it takes us about $1 million to replace a kilometer of main. And in the north of the island, because we didn't have the funding to replace all that was identified for replacement, we had to be very selective and to use a different number of criteria to select those mains. In this capital budget, we're looking at addressing between 12 to 13 kilometers of mains in the north. And we've done it again by priority, so we're looking at the transmission mains which will convey the water between the reservoirs and the sources, so that once the sources are in operation, you don't get there's some sustained pumping or transfer of the water, and you don't just get the interruption, the continuous interruption. What the continuous interruption does to our network, it weakens the network, and it disturbs any sediment or anything that may be any rust or anything that may be in the pipeline. So then you end up with issues of discoloration and that type of stuff. So we are going to be concentrating on the transmission mains first. So you're looking at Allendale to what we call Jack Corner. This is down to 6 mens. We already started the half acre to Lambert's. We're about 44% on that one. We're looking at Lambert's to Boscobel as well. Once we've completed those, we're also going to be looking at the distribution mains, because then once the water is being transferred from the sources to the reservoirs, and we get that continuous transfer, then we look at the branches off of those transmission mains, which will be the distribution mains. And approximately almost 10 kilometers of distribution mains have been slated for replacement. And again, we had to prioritize those. We have areas like Rockfield, Pike Corner, Well Road, Josie Hill that we're going to sometimes twice a week to do repairs. Even though we're changing out a length each time, we have recognized that the mains in those areas are very bad, so we have to do the replacements over there. In terms of the augmentation, we are going to be adding new water to the network. At present, we have Allendale as the primary source that produces approximately 1 million gallons per day, and we add 150,000 from the brackish water desalination plant at the Hope. That is not sufficient for the population in that area, and it doesn't allow us either to do any flushing or anything like that, because once we begin to do flushing, you're using up lots more water, flushing and swabbing to clean the mains. So with the augmentation options that we have at the Hope in terms of a brackish and seawater desalination plant there, and at Colleton brackish and seawater again, we'll be adding approximately 1.4 million gallons between those two areas, which will be sufficient enough. Actually, we have excess in that area then where we can do all of the other maintenance that we need to do to the network to keep it up. So in the north of the island, we've been very strategic, and we're looking at short-term measures, medium-term measures, and long-term measures to bring resolution to the problem that we have in that area. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
It did. Thank you. Very expansive, very detailed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director of Engineering. That was a bit of music to my ears, and I will be holding you into account for the stated work that you will be doing shortly. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just have two questions. I don't know if one was referred to already, so I'll give you both, and the one that wasn't answered, if they could do it. One of the things when I first, one of my first duties as MP, the MTW had done some roads along West Road, and they'd used some new materials. And I was told by the then engineer that these materials were supposed to be more resilient than what we normally use. But what I noted happened during the year was that you saw these big gouge outs. This is running from Warren's all the way down to the bottom of University Hill. And there were these huge gouge outs in the surface. It didn't seem to break down slowly and gradually become a big hole. You just suddenly saw these big dig outs. So I just wanted to know what is the current assessment of that new material, which you've been using. How satisfied are you with it in terms of performance, or if you know what the challenges are with it? Because the reason why I'm asking is the citizens of Barbados spend a great deal of money on roads every year. And what has been done in the past seems to break down very, very quickly. And I was really hopeful that with this new approach to surfacing the road, they would last longer and therefore would cost the government less. So that is one thing that I want to get an update on. And then the second thing, in St. James South, we have problems with flooding. We've got a lot of gullies, and based on a trip that was made to the area by the officials, I was told that you were looking at receiving dams and different types of methods for collecting the water to prevent the runoff from running down from St. Thomas and so on, down into St. James, down into the sea. I just want to know what are the plans upcoming this year to put those in place. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And I would also add in the response, if you would indicate, Honourable Minister, what is the plan of the ministry in relation to flood mitigation efforts and in terms of the annual cleaning or clearing of water courses across the island, but in particular, of course, the constituency which I have the honor to represent.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to ask Mr. Scantlebury to just address, who is the project manager for the Global Roads project, to just deal specifically with the first question raised by the Honourable Minister.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Dave Scantlebury, project manager, MTW. I believe that the honourable member was speaking about the section of road between the Darcy Scott roundabout. That would be the Simpson Motors, that's usually what we call it, and West Road. Strangely enough, when we did the work, that was the only section of work, that road, that we did not do any interventions on. And what we recognize now is that that area has small areas that are raveling, and there are potholes there. So we need to do some work there. That's approximately, I would say, 200 to 300 meters of work. However, the other section of the Cummins Highway between West Road going down to the university, that is in very good condition. We use granite as well as special materials, and it is still in good condition.
Thank you. And in relation to the second question, if Mr. Charles Yearwood, the Senior Technical Officer in Drainage, could just touch on the retention ponds.
Thank you for the question. The ministry, I said earlier, engaged in the last financial year about 22 retention ponds. We looked at areas in which we could improve, prevent, mitigate flooding in some that affect some communities. Specific to the constituency under consideration in St. James South, we did work at dealing with independent, downstream of Independence Drive husbands that otherwise get to, I don't remember the area, but downstream of Nazarene Church on Western Lake, the communities downstream. But more so in this current financial year, we did look at other areas, because one of the retention ponds is that we also use this opportunity to assist with aquifer recharge. And we have seen there'll be some benefits to water resources. This year we've done work with John Plains. This is the water course immediately north or next to Shop Smart and Holders Hill, where water otherwise would affect persons who traverse Holders Hill. For Kentridge Park, we've done work at West Terrace, water course in West Terrace, which is the water course again immediately north or next to West Terrace Primary School. We are currently looking for a suitable location that would affect Riss Road, which are the areas between, I think, 12th and 14th Avenue West Terrace. So there are works we've done, and we're continuing to look for locations. One of the concerns, there are locations we can find. We need to find locations where we have accessibility for maintenance and where we have no need to acquire a person's lands. In terms of watercourse clearance from the chairman across the island, we do have provided in our maintenance of drainage some $600,000 for watercourse clearance across the island. That is by private sector, but we also have some equipment in the ministry which will augment or be used to deal with watercourse clearing, particularly very close and near to roads that could be affected by flooding. We are this year also attempting to do an inventory of all outfalls, particularly the Scotland district. We recognize that in particular, I want to draw attention, the fording or what people refer to as East Coast Bridge. What used to be Long Pond is now a mud flat. So much of the soils that have been eroding from the Bruceville watershed has now provided what is called a mud flat, or really soft clays, and there's hardly a water body within Long Pond. So we need to pay special attention, more attention to what's happening in the outfalls along the East Coast Road and other outfalls where we have large watersheds or large areas draining to the outfall, particularly. Another one would be Joe's River. And we will use, based on that, those trips and those watercourse walks, we will determine the priority and have that work done before the rain season. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch East. Before the Honourable Member proceeds, immediately after his intervention, brief intervention, Honourable Minister, we will come to you and prepare for you can do your wrap-up.
Thank you very much. Allow me, just before I address directly what I was going to address, to take the opportunity to thank the MTW team and the Barbados Water Authority team for the sterling work that they did and are continuing to do in the Christchurch area. The road program you've done, that MTW did, was executed well. It was executed quickly, and it shows what we can do if we are fully organized. So we often give licks to MTW and to Water Authority, but I just wish to, on this occasion, compliment them for some sterling work that they did and say, well, now that you raise my expectations, please don't drop the ball. In relation to MTW, it's coming up to the hurricane season, and I know you do your normal drainage clearing and water course clearing, but there are a lot of unregistered wells in Barbados, a lot of I don't want to say undocumented wells that you might not even know are there, but that need clearing. And I hope that you have a program in place to identify all of the wells in Barbados. We spoke about this last year around hurricane season. It is coming up to that time again. It starts earlier and earlier, and quite frankly, the time to identify the wells and to cap the wells and to replace the grates and to do all the things that you need to do is now. And added to that is the trimming of trees as well, because the trees and the debris that was flying about was a major issue last time we had a hurricane. So I'm just checking to see what is your program, when you aiming to start, and what do you have in place to actually identify and address a lot of the wells that have fallen into serious neglect.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask Mr. Yearwood to just address the wider issues, but just to say to you that you are perfectly correct. We have to now build out the infrastructure, make sure that we are able to properly identify now using technology where the wells are, and to be able to keep on top of the maintenance of those wells. And for this financial year, that is where that process will obviously start. It has been a very manual exercise for the most part over the years, but I think we now recognize that we have to be able to act quickly, to be able to identify the problem and obviously to be able to solve it as well. So I'll just ask Mr. Yearwood to just elaborate a bit more as to the drainage plan.
Thanks for the question. I think this question is a logical step after Kerry Simmons' question earlier. I say that because I'll read from my notes. When MP Simmons asked the question earlier about systems and procedures, remember, sorry, Kerry Simmons, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. I reinforce what the division's approach is towards drainage stormwater management. It deals with really to improve efficiency and effectiveness, but it's really asset management drainage exercise. We have a manual well database of over 4,500 wells. We need to move those to a virtual, and we started that some years ago. However, many persons have advocated for us to locate wells and help persons in communities locate wells. We're not starting from new, and we've gone over this over and over, and we are sure that the approach has to do with how do we georeference or provide coordinates to the wells that we have in our system already. If we go towards collecting wells and get persons send them in without coordinates, then we are not advancing, and we need to do that. To this end, we have ordered and about to procure to receive 3 GPS systems for coordinating wells. We have started and we have a routine maintenance scheduling for what we consider to be manual maintenance and minutes by machines. And that one works where we have list the outfalls, we list and water courses that give us problems and others. And we also have works for retention ponds by our equipment. And then this third one has to do with reporting, monitoring, and evaluation of the works done. And this we have a challenge. We have a capacity problem. We have persons who we don't have the full core of skills and competencies in persons we have. We lost persons who were experienced 30, 40 years, and we have to move towards having persons with geographic information systems, methodologies, techniques, persons who have surveying and persons who have can bring to bear higher level of skills in routine scheduling. So that's where we are, but we definitely are moving forward. We have started to, about 20% of our wells have coordinates, and we want to move forward in that because any system we use need to be to move into a virtual environment, and we need to have coordinates to do that. Thank you.
All right, just briefly, just with respect, I understand you're purchasing the 3 GPS systems, but pretty much any cell phone can do that. We use geotagging of houses to great effect in the last election. It's not that difficult. And quite frankly, we hear the same thing every year, that it's a mammoth undertaking and you don't have enough capacity and whatnot. But when you get a bad flooding and houses are destroyed or a life is lost, then would it not have made sense to spend the money before that event happened? So I just think you need to relook your priorities a little bit and perhaps find the money and provide the capacity to just get this done once and for all. We come to this same point every hurricane season. And it can't be that we're pedestrianly moving ahead with something because it has no direct bearing on us, or so we think. But it does impact those people who get flooded out year after year after year with the slightest rain. So I think that we need to take this seriously and just address this once and for all this year. You don't need to answer that.
I will answer, Honourable Minister, simply because I think, it's easy to pass the blame sometimes to departments, but there are a few factors that I feel in my closing, Honourable Chair, as well, that I have to put on the table. Because you've heard officer after officer also speak to the issue of staffing. And certainly being able to have adequate staffing in departments prevents us as a government sometimes from being able to execute the very same policies that we have, spoken to in terms of our vision. And therefore, it means that it isn't just within the ministries that there is a challenge. It is also at the level of the civil service and the directorate in order to be able to fill those positions quickly so that the officers can do their job. And so while I agree with you that we have to get to a point of execution, I just want to say that, sometimes the fingers are pointing in different directions as well. What we have as a government to do is to start to fix these things quickly so that the persons who are most affected, which is the residents of Barbados, are not able to complain in the way that they do, especially when these disasters hit us. And so my call this evening is really an urgent one to all of the various ministries that are responsible for assisting our ministry in the Ministry of Transport and Works and Maintenance to be able to understand that we can only be effective if we have the tools, whether human resources or the equipment, to be able to work with, and perhaps also if we have the money to be able to work with to execute. And therefore, I hear you, Honourable Minister, but I do feel that we have to find that balancing act, and that we have to be fair as well to the officers, particularly based on the last comment in relation to the request for officers and not having those positions filled from time to time. Simply to say to you as well that that work has started, and to be assured that in these estimates, the process for being able to do the mapping will happen in this financial year. A lot of preliminary work had been done before in terms of consultations with persons who would be able to develop the apps to be able to map the wells across the country. And so I'm satisfied that we can start the ball rolling once we have approved the estimates, and we can start to engage with the persons who are able to build that out to support the unit as well. This area is very time sensitive because we are running against the clock in terms of the hurricane season. And for a number of reasons, I think it means that we have to always act with a certain degree of urgency, whether it is in relation to the Barbados Water Authority, whether it is in relation to the Transport Board, whether it's in relation to main ministry as well. And I give you the assurance that we intend to treat to these issues with a matter of urgency, because we do not want to find ourselves in a situation where, we're caught with our pants down. Yes, female ministers also wear pants as well. So we don't want to be caught with our pants down. And I think having gone through what we did in the last year with Hurricane Elsa, there is a certain level of urgency that this ministry must now have in relation to addressing all of the problems and the challenges that have been raised by honourable ministers here today and honourable members here today. Let me thank the permanent secretary, Mr. Mark Cummins, my parliamentary secretary, honourable member for St. Andrew, the entire team at the Ministry of Public Works, and also the Barbados Water Authority, the Transport Authority, and the Transport Board, and all of the departments under the ministry. It has only been a few weeks having become the minister of this very important ministry responsible for infrastructure across the country, and I can tell you that I'm learning fast. I have the benefit of a lot of very experienced individuals who bring to the table tremendous know-how. And despite having been on the other end at times and trying to understand why it is that things did not move as quickly as they should, certainly having now been placed in a ministry and working with these individuals, I do understand even better the constraints that we have at times within the ministry. But I give you the assurance that we're going to work together to improve the customer service and customer delivery to the people across Barbados, and that I have made that a priority, because I believe that it is not so much sometimes that we can't get things done, but it is about talking people through why you cannot get the things done. And so we have to not run from the technical issues and not fail to discuss with the country what it is that is happening. I've said to all of the officers that we have to talk the country through what is happening with the road infrastructure. We've got to talk the country through what is happening with the replacement of the water mains. We have to talk the people through the investment that is being made across the country in relation to these two areas, which has never been done before. And we have to make people realize that we are not taking this for granted. Nobody in this room and part of this team takes any pleasure in people not having water coming to their taps. And I can tell you that. But we have to now take even greater pride in being able to execute the projects quickly, make sure that we have the necessary oversight over the projects so that people are able to get their water, that they're also able to get proper bus service across the country, that we also have proper road infrastructure across the country. So I want to thank all honourable members for their questions, and to, I'm going to be brief this evening because I know that we have another head following right after, but just to say again a warm thank you, and to assure the public, particularly those that have been at the centre of this discussion over the past 2 days, that we are focused on those areas that have been neglected, and those areas that require us to give urgent priority to them because of the neglect over the course of the last couple of years. Thank you. And with those few words, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 81 do now stand part.
Question is, that Head 81 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Honourable member for St. James Central.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the House be suspended until 5 o'clock this afternoon.
The question is, Honourable Chairman be suspended until 5 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable Chairman stands suspended until 5 p.m.